The girl with red eyes approaches and someone calls out the name Inori. She places her hand on his face and he seems confused, wondering who she is. Blood flies and she has killed the boy. That one lasted a long time. She drops the knife and falls into some kind of void. The boy wonders if he really got stabbed, why she was crying and how she knew his name. Amidst these questions, suddenly, he wakes up back in the classroom, reading a manga. Our protagonist's name is Takafuji Inori, 17 years old. He's confused, not knowing what that dream was, but he's in the same classroom as always. The days were the same, or at least they should have been. Suddenly, a magic circle surrounds the entire classroom, and a burst of purple energy explodes. Everyone covers their faces, and Takafuji then finds himself with his hand on the floor, not knowing what's happening. He is now next to his classmates, unable to understand how they ended up there. Obviously, everyone is screaming in panic, wanting to know where their classroom went. At that moment, an angel appears, telling everyone to calm down. They were in the path of souls, known as the void between worlds, and she was what people usually called a goddess. All of them had been summoned to another world to become heroes who would defeat the Demon King. So far it seems cliche, but pretty soon it will get kinda crazy. The guys are standing there looking dumbfounded, wondering what this hero business is. She then explains that they will be transported to a world called Burge, in an empire called Hyjin. The fools are standing there with their mouths open, not understanding much of it. Meanwhile, Takafuji can only think about how this is just like the plot of any random story. However, the angel continues explaining that soon they would leave this place and arrive in that other world. But before that happened, they would all receive a gift. Her hand appears over each of their heads and she tells them that with this, they will receive a special ability. They should be careful not to be corrupted by this power and lead people the right way. She wishes them good luck and the scene shifts to the castle. Slowly, Takafuji opens his eyes and finds himself in a room with everyone else. A slightly tired-looking girl says that, apparently, the summoning was a success. The old men around them all celebrate, saying that the saint is truly reliable. Now the world would finally become a safe place again. Or so they say before telling everyone to be quiet. A man stands up and thanks them all for coming to this world. His name is Leisen, and he is the Emperor of Hyjin. The guy even kneels, and together with everyone else, he begs them to defeat the Demon King. Takafuji notices that at least they are being treated as nobles. At that moment, a glasses-wearing fool steps forward and asks His Majesty not to act like that. He then says he wants to ask if there's a way for them to return to their original world. Someone steps forward and says they will answer that. The girl introduces herself as Saint Aisia and says that they can indeed return to their original world. However, that would only be possible in a month when the full moon was in the sky again. And so anyone who didn't intend to fight the Demon King could stay peacefully in the royal castle for a month and then go back home. Our boy is thinking that this feels like a tourist trip to explore another place. The girls are wondering what will happen during the month they won't be there. According to the saint's explanation, the timeline of that world won't change, and they will be sent back to the exact same place. Our boy is thinking that all of this seems way too convenient. Something feels off. Then the saint asks who wants to return after a month and says they just need to say so and no one will stop them. The group looks like they want to speak up, but she just pleads with them to save her country and this world. Takafuji thinks that normally, this is the moment when some hero wannabe steps forward and declares they will fight for them. But here there's only silence, meaning it looks like his class doesn't have a hero. The guy with glasses then says that everyone seems a little uncertain and asks if they can make this decision later. The king is there with his eyes closed and our boy just notices that for now, everyone is pretty calm. Then Leisen says that in 1 month they will be able to choose whether they want to return to their world or sign a contract to become heroes here. Today is a celebration, so they should enjoy themselves. Our boy thanks them and immediately goes to try the food. Tasting another world's cuisine is perfect. He's excited to find out what ingredients are used in a fantasy world. But suddenly, the same portal that appeared beneath his feet in the classroom shows up again. He assumes it must be the work of the Empire's mages, who have already mastered their magic to this extent. He's truly eager to experience everything in this fantasy world. But then someone calls out to him. They want to know why he is the only one with a circle beneath his feet. Before he can process what's happening, he finds himself back in the same place where he met the saint, the so-called Path of Souls. The blonde appears, introducing herself, but seems a little confused. He greets her, saying they've met again, but she asks if he wasn't just here a moment ago. He replies that he was. The poor girl doesn't quite understand why this is happening. He wants to know if he's about to be summoned somewhere else, and she says probably. The problem is, there's a rule that everyone who steps into this place must receive a talent, so she places her hand on his head once again. She wishes him good luck, but our boy complains that being sent back and forth like this is irresponsible. During this whole process, he remembers that the previous circle was purple, while this one is yellow with different symbols. Then he realizes he's tied to a chair, gagged, and figures this is no time for analysis. An old man approaches, saying that it looks like the summoning was a success. Another one beside him says the boy will be called test number 12. The old man comes closer, commenting that it seems he has an offensive type magic eye. Being referred to as a test subject, Takafuji was not interested in this situation at all. It seemed these summonings were much more dangerous than he had imagined. The two lunatics start smiling, saying they will now proceed with the experiment. It's more than obvious to our boy that this is one of those crazy scientists. The man steps forward with his scalpel, saying it's time to find out what his magic eye is all about. The old man explains that there are records stating that humans summoned from another world develop a magic eye upon arrival, and his job is to prove that it's true. Our boy quickly realizes that this so-called magic eye must be the gift he received from the goddess when he arrived in this world. The old man stretches out his hand, explaining that it would be problematic if the boy had an outburst of rage or lost control. That's why he will be put into hypnosis. For a second, Takafuji is startled, but then he just watches the man casting his magic circle. The old man realizes that not only is the effect minimal, it actually seems like it's not working at all. The problem is, this is supposed to be an advanced hypnosis spell. Takafuji finds it ridiculous that this is what they call advanced magic. At that moment, the other man calls for the doctor. Takafuji's left eye holds the magic eye of time, while his right eye contains the magic eye of truth. The man is shocked and celebrates, saying that possessing two eyes of such caliber is extremely rare. Immediately, they pull out their tools, saying they must begin testing right away because this is incredible. However, Takafuji knows that if they start surgery without hypnosis, it's nothing short of torture. He absolutely does not want that to happen and wonders if he can escape using his magic eye. Suddenly, a circle appears beneath his feet. The scientists look confused, but our boy and we already know exactly what's happening. He appears before the goddess, who is once again looking like a fool. She says this is the third time and asks if he likes her that much. Our boy just says it's inevitable. Then he questions whether she has any idea why this is happening. She doesn't really know what to say, admitting that this is the first time something like this has happened, and she will have to investigate further. Takafuji realizes that by now he has seen this woman so many times that he is casually chatting with a goddess. But before he can get any answers, he appears before a young noble girl. An elf praises her, saying it's incredible that she managed to summon a humanoid monster on her first try. However, our boy did not appreciate being called a monster. In this world, he was treated like a creature and almost forced into a subordination contract. But then the magic circle activated again. He reappears in front of the goddess, already smiling. She asks if he's not tired of all this. Our boy just wants to know why the summoning keeps happening over and over again. She then said she had an idea, but there was little time, so she would have to explain it briefly. She explained that the targets of a summoning must have a strong soul that is necessary to cross between worlds, and it seems that the boy had an extremely strong and rare soul. Takafuji said that he wasn't even a saint or a good person, so it was strange that he had such a pure soul. She said it wasn't about purity, but simply that he was strong. What he needed was for his soul to bind to one of these worlds to activate the hero's contract, and then this would stop happening. The scene then shifts to a castle, where a girl holding an orb says that he now has the ability to steal abilities. He is impressed by the girl's beauty, and in this fourth summoning, he received another gift. He ran straight toward her to form the hero's contract, but before he could start, the teleportation activated again. On the fifth time, he was summoned through dark magic. The girl was exhausted, sweating with her clothes all torn, while he appeared completely relaxed. At the top of a castle on the peak of a mountain. On the sixth summoning, he was brought as the resurrected demon lord, and all the monsters celebrated. But now, back in the sky, the angel commented that he had been accumulating incredible abilities. He was impressed, but then she said that the next summoning would probably be the last. That's why she would now combine all his abilities, and when he was summoned again, he should check his status. He would probably be able to see it with his right eye. Inside a castle, someone welcomed the hero. He calmly opened his eyes, thinking, here we go again. But suddenly, he was now with other people in this place. A high school student named Ryu Shinzaki and another girl named Tamaki Kurosawa. She called out to her friends, and a final girl named Elway Isogai appeared. At that moment, someone on the throne spoke. The king said that according to legend, they must be heroes. The protagonist noticed that everyone summoned here knew each other, except him. Everyone was wondering why he was summoned randomly among these three. They all turned to the king, who questioned if the three of them were the heroes and he was just an extra person brought along. The other three confirmed, and the man said this was the first time he had heard of such a thing. Then another girl arrived, asking if they were the heroes from the other world. She introduced herself as the first princess and personally took credit for summoning them, saying they should be grateful. Our boy immediately realized that this one was one of those annoyingly self-important princesses. She then informed them that they were now in the kingdom of the rising sun, a place where not only humans existed but also demi-humans and demons. Obviously, the demons were the enemies, led by the demon king. They had their own nation and were invading all territories. That demoness really seemed dangerous. Be careful, young mortals. That was why all of humanity had joined forces to summon heroes. However, only women of royal blood could do it, and of course, she was the chosen one. Each country was obligated to train the heroes they summoned to kill the demon king. They must have realized by now what a brilliant plan this was. However, Takafuji understood that their plan was just to summon a bunch of heroes and hope someone would take care of things. The princess asked them to become stronger as representatives of this kingdom and to kill that shameless demon king. At that moment, Tamaki spoke up with a question. How were they supposed to return to their original world? The princess simply said that was impossible. After all, they should feel honored to be the proud heroes of the kingdom of the sun and should be grateful for their situation. Our boy was fuming, thinking that these bastards needed to take some customer service lessons from the Kingdom of Hyjin. The king then told them to place their hands on the stone to discover the talents they received as heroes. The tablet was brought forward, and when Ryo placed his hand, he received the limit break ability. Aoi Isogai received the magic barrier ability, and Karasawa got magic affinity. Meanwhile, our dear Takafuji received the detection ability. At least he had a blessing. But considering how simple it seemed, it didn't look like anything impressive. After that, the kingdom's people began measuring their talents and physical and magical capabilities. Ryu had superhuman physical abilities. Isogai had a natural talent for creating blessings and a high magical power measurement. Meanwhile, Tamaki also had great magical aptitude but was focused on destructive magic. As for our boy, he had no talent for magic manipulation at all. He realized that he came to another world only to be weaker than all the girls, and he wasn't happy about that. Already exhausted on the floor, he muttered that it didn't matter since they were clearly the real heroes here. That night, they gathered in Ryu's room to discuss their future. A boy looked around, wondering why Ryu's room was so much bigger than his. Meanwhile, the two girls wanted to know why he was even there if he wasn't a real hero. That one stung, but our boy decided not to answer. Tamaki then said that she wasn't really worried about him. But the protagonist noticed that she clearly was concerned about him getting too involved in this. She was obviously not an honest girl. Ryu then said that the detection ability he had could actually be very important. Takafuji noticed that each of them had very different opinions about him. Ryu then said that even if the boy was weak, Oa could just put a magic barrier around him. She agreed, saying that if he wanted that, then fine. Our guy just thought that for someone so quiet, she was actually really cute. That's when he stopped to think that all three of them were really attractive. Three lucky people in life. Tamaki then wanted to know if it was really okay for them to stay in this country. Ryu was about to say something when someone else commented that the country wasn't bad and the treatment was nice. They all looked at our boy, who was signaling for them to stay quiet. In his notebook, he had written that there were people listening to their conversation, so it was best not to say anything suspicious. The three of them stood there looking dumbfounded while he realized that the so-called blessing of detection was already proving useful. Even though he had no physical or magical talent, it was truly a remarkable ability. He could sense the presence of people or creatures beyond walls. For example, at this moment he knew exactly who was spying outside. When he was in his own room, he tried to keep the maids away, but they always came back. He then wrote in his notebook and asked Aoi to cast a soundproof barrier. It wouldn't hurt to try, and she began her chant. The circle spread, but she warned that it wasn't very strong and wouldn't last long. Ryu praised her, calling her an amazing girl. She got a little flustered. Meanwhile, Takafuji just realized that these bastards were going to flirt right in front of him. Then Tamaki wanted to know why they were spying on their conversation in the first place. Ryu said it was obvious after all. They were heroes with enough power to destroy a nation, so it was too risky to leave them unchecked. But she angrily pointed out that it made no sense since they were forced to come to this place. That's when Takafuji mentioned that this country seemed desperate. He didn't understand this world's standards, but he suspected they were in a financial crisis. That was because the king was personally involved in numerous affairs, which was unusual. On top of that, he had very few vassals for a castle of this size. Tamaki said she noticed that too, but at least the food was good. It was simple but full of spices and delicious flavors. Takafuji, however, didn't seem to enjoy the food and wondered if there was something wrong with his taste. His friends commented that their rooms felt more like a soldier's quarters than a hero's. And our boy thought to himself that they hadn't even seen his tiny room yet. Since they had never been summoned elsewhere, they had nothing to compare it to. But he still remembered his arrival in Hygen very clearly. Then he told the three of them that they needed to consider an escape plan from this country, since his detection ability let him avoid all surveillance. In the meantime, they also had to figure out how to return to their original world and get out of here. Since the three of them were considered this place's only hope, there was no way they were going to let their hope return to their world. Besides, even though the princess had said there was no way to go back, it seemed like a lie or something she was hiding. Ryu said he agreed with the boy. The problem was that they were still weak and didn't know enough. So for now, they needed to observe things for a while. Suddenly, Tamaki moved closer to our boy. She commented on his yellow eye and asked what that was. Our boy quickly covered his face, realizing he had forgotten about that detail. After all, it wasn't common for a Japanese person to have a yellow eye. But Ryu just said that everyone has secrets they don't want to share, so it was best not to bother the guy about it. Every teenager goes through a phase like this, but soon enough, you grow out of it. For now, they should just ignore it. Our boy noticed that Ryu thought he was wearing a contact lens to look stylish like a protagonist, but maybe that was actually a great excuse. So he told them to behold the power of the mystical eye. Sometime later, he was back in his room, wondering what was up with this eye. He checked his status, and man, there were a lot of attributes listed. The problem was that, just like us, he didn't know this world's average, so he couldn't say for sure how strong or weak he was. But judging by the physical tests, maybe they were bad or something was off. Then he decided to check his abilities. He had a different ability in each eye, the Demon King's dark magic, the ability to steal abilities, and finally detection. He then noticed that he had some strange attributes, probably received when he was summoned as a monster. He belonged to the demonic race and was classified as a vampire with the rank of Baron. He had a debuff called Hatred of the Sun God. During the day, his attributes were reduced to 1/10, and he couldn't use his abilities. Now it all made sense. He had struggled during the tests because he was exposed to sunlight, and the food tasted bad because it had garlic. Not to mention, when he looked at the girls, he found himself strangely interested in biting their necks and drinking some fresh blood. This whole time, he had been so focused on using detection that he had forgotten to check what was happening inside his body. Multiple strange eyes, vampire traits, and all sorts of mutations. He couldn't even understand what he was anymore. Little by little, he started to remember everything that had happened. After recalling everything and considering all the summonings, here's what he has. The detection ability allows him to sense any presence near him. He then grabs an old spoon and says that with another ability, he can consume the energy of a material and create a weapon. With that, the cast iron spoon transforms into a knife. The red eye man, motion detection, absolute measurement, long-range vision, microscopic vision, night vision, clairvoyance, illusions, X-ray vision, photographic memory, perception of external gazes. My God, what a list. He notices that at least everything was vision-related. It was some kind of eye 2.0. What he doesn't quite understand is the yellow eye. The description stated that magic circles seen by that eye could be transferred to his pupil and activated at will. He decides that later he'll have to take some time to study the magic of this world. The problem is that the list of abilities is long and there are several he doesn't understand. At least the vampirism part isn't too complicated. If he drinks enough of someone's blood to kill them, they turn into a ghoul. If it's a virgin, they become a subordinate vampire if he drinks their blood. If not, the person just turns into a ghoul. Additionally, he can simply kill someone, give them a bit of his blood, and they will become his servant too. Two interesting parts are that if he drains all the blood, he can steal the person's memories and also their abilities. As long as he can use his powers freely at night, he's sure it won't be hard to get stronger. But first, he needs to adapt to this body and this world. The next day, under the sunlight, someone introduces herself as the Knight Commander of the Kingdom of the Rising Sun. The peculiar blonde's name is Ijeana Ishida. Our boy, who is just a little bit sexist, says it's amazing that there's a female knight and commander in this place. Maybe that's possible in fantasy worlds, or maybe it's related to their financial issues. Then the woman calls out to the two girls saying that they seem to have talent for magic, but they need to learn the basics of martial arts. Normally, they would start with strength training, but she thinks that won't be necessary. Our boy, however, isn't excited about this. Apparently, his stats aren't as impressive, considering that Ryu has 1500 strength and everything above 1000. Tamaki has more HP than him and 3500 intuition, while Aoi has slightly less intuition, but a bit more in everything else. The stats of the three, from the moment they appeared, already surpassed the limits of a human in this world. Then Ijeana tells them to choose what suits them best and later learn the basics of martial arts. However, the fool over there would be different. She warns that first they need to develop his physical strength. The problem is that the boy is doing push-ups under the sun, which is destroying his attributes. Not only is he weaker during the day, but he also gets severe headaches. Ijeana says she will personally train him, so he better take it seriously. But the poor guy is already getting dizzy, and there's no way for him to escape this. Suddenly, the princess, who is annoying as hell, asks for permission to enter with her group. That's exactly what Takafuji is thinking too. However, she wasn't alone. There were other people beside her. Since the woman next to the princess stood close to her, she was probably someone of high status as well. She was a beautiful woman, but her expression was cold like a doll with a fake smile. Ijeana greeted the princesses and asked what brought them there. Takafuji immediately stopped training and sat back, completely relaxed, curious to see what would happen. The other girl just greeted them politely, while the annoying princess dramatically stated that she had put aside her commitments to come say hello, so everyone should be grateful. Our boy just laughed at her until the other woman stepped forward. She introduced herself as the second princess and said it was a pleasure to meet him. That afternoon, she wanted to have a conversation with him. The scene then shifted to a chamber in the castle. In front of a board, she explained that they would have lessons there, but he found it highly suspicious that he was getting a separate lesson. The other heroes were also having lessons, but with the first princess in a different room. The truth was, all of this was because the first princess refused to teach someone who wasn't a hero. To her, that was an insult and an absurdity. He didn't care much, but he swore that one day he would get revenge for this. The second princess then said she would begin the lesson, but our boy wanted to ask some questions first. He asked if the first princess was older than her since she was called the second princess, but she explained that no, things were complicated. To sum it up, she said that the first princess was the true heir to the throne. Takafuji knew that royal succession was always a messy affair. Obviously, he didn't want to get involved in something like that. During the lesson, he learned that the Kingdom of the Rising Sun was founded by the hero who defeated the previous Demon King. That hero was a mage. In other words, The founder of this place was a witch, which was why witch worship was deeply rooted everywhere. The throne was always passed down through female heirs. They chose a king to marry, and only then did he become regent to govern the country. However, if the queen requested a divorce, he would stop being king. Thanks to the second princess, he learned about history and the fundamentals of magic, but he was already exhausted and went to sleep. Later that night, he started studying magic since the next day would be a practical test. At least he managed to borrow a book from the second princess. He knew she definitely didn't like that he had fallen asleep during class and didn't like that he asked for a book either. But just like a doll, she simply smiled and said it was fine. Looking at the pentagram, he said it was time to test what he couldn't manage the night before. He then activated the true mystic eye and observed the circle. In theory, he should be able to record it in his retina to use whenever he wanted. The problem was that nothing was happening. He wasn't even sure if it was activating at all. He also tried with other magic circles, but as he expected, nothing happened. So far, everything had been a complete failure. Then he remembered he had the 2.0 eye, saw some paper nearby, and started drawing the circles. The vision in that eye was so good that he could perfectly recall every circle he had seen before coming to this world. In theory, that should have been impossible due to the old man's hypnosis. But the eye was completely different, and he was able to draw the circles with ease. Staring at the paper, an energy radiated from his eye. It was something he had never felt before, so maybe he had finally activated this thing. Excited to test if it was working, he rang the little bell. A maid entered, asking if she had been summoned, and our boy explained that he needed a little favor. Before she could react, he activated his eye and successfully cast the old man's hypnosis spell. A second later, her eyes became unfocused. He ran his hand across her face and confirmed that the magic had worked. To test it further, he asked what color her underwear was, and she answered black. Not that he didn't already know, after all, he had X-ray vision, right? Considering everything that had happened, he wondered. Maybe the ability to steal magic could only store circles from the same world where he obtained it. If that was true, then the only magic he would really have was advanced hypnosis. That was one possibility, but he couldn't be sure. When he had been summoned to other worlds, he had also seen every circle. If he concentrated, maybe he could summon them too. With that, he recalled one of them and successfully created the magic in front of him. Instead of being sent to another world, he was teleported to a forest just ahead. Apparently, he could use this as a teleportation spell, and he could combine the red eye's long-range vision with the yellow eye's portal ability. With that, he could leave the castle anytime he wanted. Now that he was far away, there was no danger in testing other spells. He then touched a wall and created a dark magic circle. With this ability, he could control inanimate objects, move them freely, and store them in his shadow. Objects controlled by this magic couldn't interact with anything outside the spell's influence. However, he could release the control, allowing normal interaction. While it was a useful spell, it also had inconvenient limitations. With dark magic, he could also use Shadow Step. The ability allowed him to enter one surface and exit from another nearby. Inside a thin tree, he found it strange. He felt like he was in a spacious area. He then decided to test the creation ability again. A rock began to dissolve, and he transformed it into a sword. He focused and started recalling every movement his eye had captured from the commander. With just one look, he memorized them and effortlessly executed the same cuts. Now that it was nighttime, he planned to practice as much as possible since he'd be exhausted by morning. After some time, he was completely drained but had the feeling that something had improved. Then a window popped up, stating that he had obtained swordsmanship level 1. With that, he learned how to unlock abilities. Now it was time to figure out how to level up. Using his detection ability, he sensed something nearby. From the bushes, he saw some kind of monstrous rabbit carrying another creature in its mouth. It looked like a bird, but it had fur, which was strange. Using his identification skill, he found out it was a demon bird gecko. The problem was that, judging by its stats, the damn thing was actually quite strong. Then he remembered hearing some people in the castle talk about how this creature's feathers were used for various things, which made him wonder how such weak people were hunting these things. As he walked through the forest, he found other creatures that seemed weaker. However, the lowest attribute among them was 600, and some even surpassed his own. Clearly, this was a high-level monster forest, which was a problem. With his current stats, he could win in a one-on-one fight. The problem was that the chance of multiple enemies appearing was high. Meanwhile, back at the castle, the incredibly beautiful Igiana was walking through the halls and calling for her highness. She told the second princess that the area was secure, but even so, she shouldn't be wandering alone at night. However, the princess then said she wanted to have a conversation with her. She asked if it was true that artifacts weren't being used in Takafuji's training. The commander replied that none of the heroes were using artifacts yet. The girl pressed the issue, asking why and pointing out that sooner or later, they would have to use them. The woman glanced to the side and then said that artifacts increased strength, but these heroes were not ready yet. Without physical and mental strength, it could become too dependent on them. That's why, for now, the best approach was to monitor them and prepare them gradually. The girl lowered her gaze, then smiled, saying that she really should never have questioned the strongest human. The commander remained silent for a second before saying that her smile had lost its former shine. The second princess turned and said she hadn't even noticed that. Igiana then wanted to know her opinion on the first princess, to which she responded that she knew the girl was talented, dedicated, and an ambitious woman. However, The commander questioned whether she truly believed that. Then the second princess said that the place was safe from dangers, but not safe from people who listen in on conversations. She then wished her good night and left. The commander remained there thinking that Princess Aaliyah was being very cautious, but she shouldn't be afraid of her. A few days passed and our boy was getting used to this world. Obviously, the other heroes were making progress and he was the slowest when it came to physical evolution. On the first day, Ryu already looked comfortable wielding a sword, and now he was continuing down the path of a swordsman. Tamaki had started using a staff, but her magic had a peculiarity. She was slamming her spells into the ground as if wielding a giant hammer, and he couldn't understand the logic behind it. Meanwhile, Aoi was training with a bow. Normally, archers needed protection, but since she had a barrier, that actually made sense. So now they had Ryu, who was extremely strong in close combat, Tamaki, who blew everything up both from a distance and up close, and Aoi, who was a self-sufficient archer while also defending others. Our boy, on the other hand, had only been able to train properly for the past 3 days. He had already noticed that they were only teaching him how to throw weapons from a distance. They were training him in stealth movement and how to disable traps. It was obvious they wanted to turn him into a scout to make full use of his detection ability. But when night fell, he would return to the forest to practice his abilities. At the moment, he was practicing controlling objects freely and remotely. He directed the dagger's trajectory and canceled control at the last second so it would stick into the tree. However, as he looked up at the moon, he was still furious about that damn sun curse. He wondered if it would disappear once he leveled up. For now, all he could do was keep improving his abilities. The demon bird Tekka was there, drooling as it prepared to eat when something came rushing toward it. Man, it was Takafuji flying at full speed. The guy was practically off the ground. Now he was using his dark mana control combined with object control to restrain creatures. With that, he easily approached, locked eyes with the beast, and activated hypnosis. The monster froze, allowing him to get close without any risk. He finished it off, lifted it with dark magic, and stored it in the void. Man, he could enter his own void without a problem. And since he was a vampire, you already know what he was about to do. Taking advantage of the fact that no one was watching, he drank the monster's blood. Once he was done, he left the area. He quickly located his next target, but this one was ugly as hell, and he knew it wasn't going to taste good. Unfortunately, beggars can't be choosers, so he kept hunting until there was nothing left to do. As dawn broke, he teleported back to his room. So far, this had been his daily routine. Then Nala entered his room, greeted him, and told him to wake up. Our boy had been trying to use hypnosis on her as little as possible, but it was inevitable since he needed to gather information about this kingdom. Through this, he learned that the current queen had been unable to bear children for a long time. In a country ruled by women, that was a major problem, since the queen wouldn't have a daughter to inherit the throne. To make matters worse, young noble girls were mysteriously dying. To prevent their lineage from ending, they accepted a noblewoman as one of the king's concubines, and that woman gave birth to a child. That child was Aaliyah, the second princess. She was raised with love until she turned 7, but that's when the true queen finally gave birth to a daughter. Her name was Amanda, meaning the beloved girl. True to her name, the queen loved her far more than the other, especially since her daughter had inherited an incredible talent for magic. With that, Aaliyah was no longer considered a potential heir. The moment Amanda turned 7, she automatically assumed the position of the first princess. Everyone celebrated while Aaliyah stayed in the corner pretending not to care. But she realized that from that day forward, her existence no longer had any meaning in this world. She was forgotten by the people, abandoned by her own mother, and no one in the royal family wanted to interact with her. That was how Aaliyah was forced to live in solitude like a doll. Takafuji thought that she was just like him, since no one expected anything from either of them. She then smiled at him and gently asked him to wake up, telling him that even though the lessons were boring, they were essential for his survival. Our boy was exhausted, yawning, wondering why she was nagging him today, considering that she normally didn't bother him. She then commented that she had heard he was learning espionage techniques during training. Even though he wasn't talented in magic, it seemed like he had a good chance of making use of what he was learning here. One thing our protagonist didn't understand was why he couldn't properly use the magic taught in this world. He knew it was probably a rare case, since even Nala, a simple maid, could easily manipulate multiple objects. However, Aaliyah said that Commander Ijeana Ishida was a busy woman and wouldn't have taken time to train him if she didn't see potential in him. But the boy replied that maybe she just saw the advantage of being known as the person who trained one of the heroes. That's when Aaliyah slammed the table and said no. She was certain that he could become strong, and that was why she wanted to see him put in effort. He was a bit confused by how close she was, but she turned away and told him to follow. In the next scene, they were descending a long staircase. After what felt like an endless path, the two of them stood before a massive door. She cast a spell and said they would continue his training in this room. Then she added that even though he was a hero, people called him a failure. She turned to him and asked if he didn't find that shameful. Takafuji once again wondered what was going on with this girl today to make her so fired up. He knew that ever since her misfortune, she had been suppressing her emotions.